I'm very pleased to welcome you to yet another Start of Grind fireside chat event. And with great honor and great pleasure, I please to welcome Mr. Nitzan Achsaf of Wix. Nice round of applause, everybody. And while preparing for this event, I was really thrilled about the variety and depth of experience, and I'm very happy that we all have the opportunity to delve into and to see for ourselves and maybe see how we ourselves can become a more successful people. So, Nitzan, you're currently a VP at Wix, and under your kind of supervision, you have the product, the UX, the design, the QA, the marketing, like so many things, right? Our initial start of the conversation is, so how did you came up to this point? Where did it all start?
So first of all, thank you for having me. If I need to think back to when I was super young. I started when I grew up in a very techie family, and my father was the CEO of Motorola in Israel. So I was always part of understanding tech and living the technology world. And I remember that I started to play video games when I was like 5 and 6, and understand how a cellular network works when I was 8. And then I started to program when I was about 12, and I was always fascinated by this world.
But how do you start programming? How do you start coding? Just on the fly?
Yeah, so it was when something is really interesting to you, then you find the ways. Back then there was no internet, it was like BBS, and you need to go and find different ways of how to do that. You need to find other people that already did it before, so you can learn from them. So we had like groups of people meeting.
Offline?
Yeah.
Okay. And what were the objects of your coding? What were you coding?
Yeah, so again, it was more things that interest me. At the beginning, it was more about how to do different like 3D modeling. Of course, it was 2D, but how to make it look like 3D. So a lot of animations. And then I moved to do like simple games. It was back when I was fascinated by quests, which are like puzzle games. Yeah. And I think everything really started there.
So which year are we talking about here?
The early 90s.
Early 90s, all right. And the platforms, or you were just plain coding and compiling?
Yeah, it was actually all over the place. Yeah.
All over.
Yeah.
All right. So yeah, you started coding, and then you finished your school, and as it's common in Israel, you went to the army. How did it go there?
Yeah. So because I was a geek, then the Israeli army identified that I'm super geeky, and they started a new program for kids that knew how to basically develop code when they were young. So I was part of these. We had like 15 people in the program, and we learned how to do advanced programming. Then actually after a year, they gave me the opportunity to manage a team. So consider myself at the age of 19, needing to manage people. This is where, the first time, of course, I managed people and understood what does it mean to manage people. And one of the learnings there for me was that it's all about the soft skills, which I think makes a lot of sense now, but when you're young, you don't really understand it. And I think that many developers that want to move to be managers think that it's super easy because it's like whatever they're doing with code and they know how to like manage the code and make things that makes a lot of sense. They move to manage people, and it's completely different. Suddenly you have things that don't make any sense. So for me, it was a big revelation, and it was also the first time that I really understood that I love managing people.
Okay, so you stayed for how many years? 3 years. Yeah. So that was more than the.
That's actually how much. That's the average.
The average. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so you're off the army now. Next steps.
Yeah. So I basically started to work in different startups, and it was 2000. It was before the bubble burst. It was just a year before. 99, 2000, and I joined different startups, mainly around interactive television. In parallel, I did my bachelor in computer science, and so I worked in parallel. And then after, I would say about, after my bachelor degree, so all around it was about 7 years of actually managing R&D teams, I understood that I want to do something different, and I joined IBM. But I didn't join the regular IBM. I joined a division in IBM which was responsible for developing strategies. So back then, it was 2003, IBM acquired PwC Management Consulting, which is an arm of PwC. They spin it off.
PricewaterhouseCoopers.
That's right, yeah. And the strategy of IBM behind it is that if they can give strategic value to CEOs and talk to CEOs, not to CTOs, and give them, the strategy plan, then part of the strategy plan is going to be the implementation plan, which will also include IT. And then IBM has an end-to-end offer, starting with the CEO. That was the vision behind the acquisition. And already actually in my first project, and again, it's like I'm super junior, right? Like I just started, and they put me in a project which was about cost reduction. So when you're in a strategy consulting like McKinsey, there are corporate strategy, marketing strategy, cost reduction. There are different type of projects that you're doing for customers. So the first one that I did was cost reduction. And long story short, after 2 months into the project, although I'm super junior, I was responsible for the IT part of the project. And we're talking about $50 million that we need to cut. It came from the CEO of the bank. And you can imagine that IBM was the biggest IT provider, right? So we need to cut costs, and of course we need to cut also IBM costs. So then a few executives of IBM called me for a meeting, told me that it's a bit of a problem to do that. And I explained to them that if they're willing to take such a project, they need to rethink if they actually want to do that, because it's against other things that IBM is doing. And I told them that I cannot be biased there. So in Israel, it's called the chutzpah, which having like the guts to, although you're junior or not in your place, to say what you really think. So I think it was one of the first times that I actually needed to use it. Mm-hmm. But again, what I learned from it is to be, to go with your truth. Although it was really hard. And after that, I did other projects which were mainly around marketing strategies, which was really cool, to different organizations. And this is where I actually learned the different methodologies of how to do that.
Mm-hmm. And this chutzpah thing is really something of interest to me, and I think to the audience as well. So you feel that you're going against your own truth. You felt at the time. Do you think it's you can work for someone's company because you don't you're not the founder of Wix as well? But don't you encounter more of these situations that companies' policies or companies' interests contradict to your own inner truth? Is it possible to find such a flow that it goes with you?
At least for me, it's hard to do that. So if I'm in a company where I don't see eye to eye with my truth, then I'm not going to stay there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so IBM, you did your chutzpah. How did it end for you?
So again, I learned a lot, mainly in other projects which were more around marketing strategies, and actually towards my end of my tenure there, one of the executives of IBM moved to a different company named M Systems, which was later acquired by SanDisk. M Systems were the inventor of the USB flash drive, and he took me actually with him. So this is actually how I moved to a different company.
So they didn't kick you out for this 50 mil cut?
I hope that they reevaluated.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're now at the M Systems, and they have invented a cool new product that probably nobody knows about, nobody feel the need to use it, and you were in the marketing team, you said?
Yeah, it was between marketing and strategy. When I joined them, so I joined the division that's responsible, so we had different business units. I was in the business unit of the USB flash drive, the main product. M Systems also did other things, like flash cards for cameras and SSD, solid state drive for hard drives, now in every laptop, but we're talking about 15 years ago. Back then it was in like black box for a jet engine. Basically when I joined, the USB flash drive was already known, and it started to be a commodity. So it was like after the boom, and then everybody started to use it, but then it was commodity, so the prices went down. So it was actually a cool time to join M Systems because I could use what I just learned a year and a half before about marketing strategy and do the same kind of concepts at M Systems, where we did, it's called value-based segmentation, where you do segmentation based on what users can actually do with your product. Based on that, we identify different segments that we didn't think about them before, and we developed new products. And for me, it was the first time that I actually worked with product people and marketing people and designers. I think this is the first time that I understood that I love doing product and what product actually means. We're talking about 2004, 2005, and product just started. You know, if I'm thinking about myself, for instance, in the Israeli intelligence, I was a developer, but I also did product. I just didn't know that it's product because in 96, 97, there was no product role. So you did everything yourself.
Just frame it that way, but the actual execution was
that's right.
there.
And
okay, so you said you had to work with many different roles. So what's the most important thing when you have to manage a team composed from different roles?
So I think I managed more, I would say, cross-functional teams a bit later. There it was still more around analysts and more around market research and more like marketing roles. Mm-hmm. So it took me a few more years to actually manage different functions. But when I'm thinking about M Systems, one person that really was influential for me was the CEO and founder, Dov Moran. He actually invented the USB flash drive, and like he always started like presentations when he was talking about M Systems values, like company values, mm-hmm. And he always say our number one value by far is like people first. And like putting people like in the first place, that's the most important, and then execution, and then innovation, and I think that like for me it really resonated, and I understood what does it mean to really think through everything that people come first, because you can think of companies that are successful because of marketing or strategy or product or tech, but at the end of the day it's all people. And it's easy to forget that. But once you make sure that people are first and you always recruit the best people, then the whole environment changes. So that's something that I took with me, till today.
But for me, that might sound, a little like something like a catchy phrase from a poster. People first. Oh yeah, people first. But on practical terms, for example, in your current day-to-day activities, what does it mean to have people first?
Yeah. So for instance, it means that when I think about recruitment of people, I think of getting like an A+ person or someone with the potential of A+. So I identify that they have talent together. Unless they fall in these two buckets, I'm not going to recruit them. And this is something, it's really important because when you bring only talent, then other talent want to join. And the current people that you have also wants to stay because they're working with talented people. So that environment is really important. And once you break that, and you bring like B and C people, then the whole dynamics change. And this is when people are starting to leave companies. You know, so it's hard to maintain, but it's something that is like probably one of the most important things to do, to keep maintaining that.
Then just staying on this topic for a little more. Getting people is one thing, retaining them or like getting them to work together, you know, and creating a culture is another thing. So maybe what are your insights on creating a workplace that this talent wants to stay?
Yeah. So I think that it's important that the first few people that you bring are super strong people. And they should be senior people with a lot of experience. Of course, you need to work really well with them. If there is a graph of capabilities and ego, I like a lot of capabilities and low ego, which is super hard to find. But if you find these kind of people, and that's the beginning of your DNA, it sets everything to place because they bring in other people that have the same, you know, high capabilities, low ego, and it's a fun environment. And only after you have that in place, you can allow yourself to bring more junior or you know, mid-level people. Again, not because they won't be A+ player. Again, it's important that they will have the talent together, but they don't have enough experience. But now we have the infrastructure to actually grow them, right? And then they can, and this is a way for you to actually scale.
Mm-hmm. Just okay. So last question from people first section. Do you have any examples that you could give us, maybe not only from Wix, but maybe from previous experiences, when, for example, your strategy said you should go one way, but you had to go the other way because it was people first? Like, do you get my point?
So, I actually had that in a different company later on, named Sonic Bits. It was a startup in Boston, and what I had to do there is actually execute, and in the same time, I understood that I need to basically replace the development team. It's going to be very hard to do both, right? So this is an example where I had first to fix what's happening in terms of the people, make sure that I have the right people in place, and then I can actually do the execution.
Okay, yeah. So we'll get to that a bit later. Now let's move on with your career. And after M Systems, you went to the
US, yeah.
the US. Okay.
I started my MBA at Harvard Business School, which is a super cool environment. It's a program for 2 years, and it's all based on the case method. So basically, every day you're doing between 2 and 3 cases. Each case is about usually an executive that has some kind of a dilemma that you need to help them fix. It could be in marketing and strategy, in product, operations, finance, accounting, whatever. And I calculated that over 2 years, you're doing like 600 cases. So, and this is the only way that they teach. They don't do frontal lectures. So this is how they actually started it more than 100 years ago. And most MBAs out there actually use those cases as well. So when they teach, they basically buy it from HBS. And for me, it was an amazing opportunity to first of all, be exposed to those kind of people. So you're sitting in a classroom with 90 super smart people from all over the world. They're coming from different industries, from different functions, right? In each different companies, different functions. So we have such a variety of people, and every day you're coming to the class and analyzing a case. And then you have perspective of all those amazing people, where we analyze the case together and come up with, what are the options for the protagonist of the case. And the second thing is, for me, it was really learning from US folks about the US economy and how to make business in the US. You learn about so many different companies in the States, and there are people that are coming from different Ivy Leagues that are first in their class in terms of public speaking, so you can learn from them how to actually articulate. So for me, it was an amazing experience.
So you went to the US to study there, or how did you make this decision?
So I grew up as I mentioned before, in a very techy family, but it was also very US oriented. So Motorola headquarters were in Chicago. My father was there every few months. I was there with him many times. So I always knew that I want to live in the US for a few years. So for me, it was more a matter of timing. And I thought that it would be a good opportunity to move there to do my MBA, because then first I can learn from the MBA itself, but also it will open different doors for me in the future.
Okay, so what doors did it open?
Yeah, so one of the cool things of going to these kind of schools is that all kind of companies are coming to recruit. And this is where I actually found Yahoo in the Silicon Valley. And I did my internship there. So between the first and second year, you're doing internship. I did the internship in product, so it was the first time that I actually did proper product. During those 3-4 months, I integrated different products that Yahoo acquired into web search. So I joined the search engine division there. So they acquired Flickr and Upcoming, which is like for events, and I needed to think how to integrate them into web search. So it was really cool. Again, we're talking about 2007. So the web just started to grow again after the bubble burst, and it was really early days of social and what does it mean to have social and real time in web search. And then I decided to join them full time a year later. And when I joined them, I started a new team there that's responsible for intent experiences. Intent means understanding the intent of a user from a query. So the user is writing something, and you need to understand from a query what it means. Again, until 2007, Yahoo or Google, doesn't matter, like it was really super, I would say, simple. And this is the first time that we actually use machine learning to do that kind of things. So I had like 100 PhDs, super smart people that work on my projects. So it was between identifying intent from a query, which is local, news, shopping, whatever, and then taking more real estate on the page. So we understood intent for about 50% of the traffic. And you need to realize that back then, web search at Yahoo was worth $3 billion. And we had 150 million users, unique users per month. So every pixel that you see on that page was worth a lot of money. So it was cool. For me, it was a great school to how to develop products, mainly in a data-driven way. And we did a lot of things with machine learning, from ranking and content extraction from the web, understanding connections. It was really cool time to be there.
Okay, so what were your main learning points, main lessons learned in this company?
Yeah, so a couple of things. So I joined Yahoo when it was a pretty challenging time. It started to be challenging at Yahoo. Back then, by the way, in 2007, the market share of search between Google and Yahoo was pretty close. So today it's really far. Back then it was maybe 10% difference. So Yahoo search was really strong. And it basically came from different acquisitions of talented people. It was a merger of a few companies that Yahoo acquired. So there were super strong people there, and this is where I learned how to do product. The second thing that I learned there is that there was challenging times because Microsoft was rumored to acquire Yahoo. And then there was like stagnation in their organization. And I had to see how I can convince developers that have zero motivation to actually work on projects. So I learned there how to give motivation to people, how to think about new kind of projects that are super cool, and again, it's something that I think was really worth being part of. And another thing to consider is that when times are hard, many people leave. So it's funny because when I joined Yahoo, between me and the CEO was like 14 different people, like 14 levels, right? And when after 2 years before I left the company, there were like 3. Now, one, it was a lot of luck, be it because many people left, and I think it's something that is worth considering, that when times are tough in companies, if you're super motivated, actually you can move much faster and take a lot of ownership. So it's something to people to consider. You don't have to leave a company. Sometimes it's actually a very good opportunity.
Mm-hmm. But I heard a billion-dollar question. How to motivate unwilling people? You said you learned that.
Yeah.
Would you please share something?
Yeah. I don't know if I have a silver bullet, but I think it's more about...
Okay, so what are your rules of thumb? How do you work your way through it?
So for me, at least, it was really portraying a vision of where we can go. Back then, we had a lot of competition with Google. So we work on projects that Google didn't do back then. So it's funny to consider, but Yahoo search started machine learning 6 years before Google, because Google really wanted to control everything in it's a parametric function, so they wanted to control everything, so they will know exactly what makes everything ticks. And Yahoo said, doesn't matter, it's a black box. We just want to make sure that search is better. And after 6 years, that's what Google did, right? So they moved to machine learning. But back then, again, we were in the cutting edge of everything. So it was really about portraying the vision, thinking through different experiences that you can do, of utilizing those tools. Nobody did that before. And working really closely with them.
So from what I've heard now, you've independent of the company you're in, you work with the latest cutting edge technology. How do you get to this? Is this luck, or are you on purpose searching for such technologies that you want to get your hands on, or what's the mechanics?
So I love being in the cutting edge, but to tell you the truth, at Yahoo it was really luck. I didn't know that Yahoo is, M-Systems. I knew that the product was cutting edge, so that's why I joined, because I love consumer, and it was basically consumer electronics, which was fascinating to me. So I'm always drawn to technology and to being in the cutting edge. But sometimes it's luck. Sometimes I'm trying to navigate to make sure that I'm in the right companies.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you spend how many years? Yeah. In 2.5 years in Yahoo, and then you left for Sonic Bits.
Yeah. So I moved back to Boston for personal reasons, to be with my girlfriend, who is now my wife, and I joined Sonic Bits, which is consumer web company doing matchmaking between 300,000 musicians and 30,000 promoters. Promoters are basically different companies that are looking for talent. If it's the biggest festivals in the world, like South by Southwest, Bonnaroo, CMJ, if it's clubs, MTV, coffee shops. And we did the matchmaking between them. So we helped artists actually get gigs, get job opportunities. And back then I joined to manage the product and design teams. But I didn't know that after a week in the job, our CEO is going to fire the CTO, and he gave me also to manage the dev department. so it was, not exactly the way that I wanted to join the company. And I really needed to assess what's going on there. So on one hand, I started to work on developing the right kind of relationship with all the people and mainly the CEO. I understood that the CEO really disliked the dev team because he was super non-techy, so he really didn't understand what's happening there. It was like a black box. He never tried to understand. And luckily, I had engineering background, so I could go and actually manage that team, which actually brings me to something else, which over your career you learn different things and you have different, I would say, tools in your belt. And I think like you never know when you're actually going to use them. So, at that point I didn't know that I'm actually going to manage engineers again. But it was really helpful for me to have that kind of a background. So after the assessment, I understood that it's not going to work with the dev team. They weren't strong and they really disliked the company because they loved the CTO and he was gone. They didn't understand how to work with the CEO. So I had to find a solution. I found a friend that I knew from the intelligence work in Toronto. I convinced him to move to Boston, and I made him the manager of the R&D teams, and together we started to recruit super strong people, and eventually I had to let go of the remaining engineering team. So
yeah, and that was your case of putting people first.
That's right. So it's super important that there will be the right kind of people in the company. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so your lessons in this company, the main lessons here, apart from how to put the people first.
Yeah. So for me, it was the first time that I actually needed to fire someone, and I think it's like one of the hardest things that you need to do as a manager. It's something that you own it to the people, to the people in the company that are remaining, the people that need to leave, to yourself, to everybody to do that. And although I knew that it's the right thing to do from different reasons, it was still super hard. But it was a very important lesson for me that it must be done. Other things that I learned is, it was the first time that I was exposed to the board of directors. So what does it mean to present something to the board? How to think through strategy, how to actually make it into an implementation plan. It was the first time that I actually managed cross-functional team, product design, engineering, so everything from product development. What does it mean to be in a startup that is growing? We were like 50 people, $10 million.
Okay, so now you had this team of cross-functional team. Usually, people with totally different views of the world, totally different vocabularies. They speak different languages, so to say. So how do you manage them?
Yeah, you're right. Because product are always pushing to do something which is big and a lot of features, and they're thinking about 2 years from now. And engineers are thinking how to make things happen and how to do it the right way. Designer want everything to look beautiful. But at the end of the day, also when you're CEO, you have to balance everything and make decisions. So I think it's really a matter of how you put all the people in one room, and especially the leaders, and talk through the different options and start trying to get to a consensus. And if there is no consensus, you have to make the call, right? And it's about balancing. So there's no right way, one right way. It's really a matter of how important it is to get to the market. What does it mean if you're not delivering? If you're willing to lose scope? If you're willing to develop, very fast, then you have technical debt that you need to pay at some point of time. There are no, free lunch, right? There's no free lunch. It's a matter of balancing all this.
Were you using your data-driven approach back then already?
Yeah, I would say that in terms of data, I think it's what helped me is because I came from a super data-driven company like Yahoo. I actually understood that the data that Sonic Beats has is also worth a lot of value. So back then it was really just musicians paid money. But when I came to the company, I understood that we have data about 300,000 musicians in the world. We know where they're playing, what's the size of the venue, what's the day of the week. So for instance, you know that if they play in the middle of the week versus the weekend, then the weekend actually means that you're a better player because they want you to play there in the weekend. And if you played in a bigger festival, it means something. And if you played in a venue which is 50 places versus 300 places, it means something. So you take all that data into account, all that BI, and you actually can package it in such a way that we then went to different record companies and say, look, we can tell you who is up and coming, who is the next big thing. So for me, it was actually nice to come from a totally different approach and open a new kind of business for the company.
Was it successful, this line?
Yeah, it was successful. It was actually the first time that something like that actually happened, right? You're selling data. Again, in 2009, 2010, it was still new, that kind of approach.
Okay, so
that's probably all, and we're moving to your next career stop.
Yeah, so then I, again, for personal reasons, decided to move back to Israel with my wife. And I started a startup named Safety Nest. It was also consumer web, but in finance, in fintech. And the idea actually came after 2008, where there was another crash in the market. And many people lost a lot of money in the stock market. So if you look at 401k, which is like the pension for Americans, in 1 year they lost like 40%. Luckily for them, in 2009, 2010, it went up again, but many people actually took out their money. So this means that they actually lost it. And also, you can never know if it will go up again. So if you think about, for instance, the NASDAQ, in 2001, it reached a peak, and it took 16 years for it to get to the same peak. So if you invested there, you lost a lot of money. So the idea was to actually have a new kind of approach, which is instead of banks managing your money, it's going to be tech companies managing your money. So that was the first innovation. The second innovation is taking a very small percentage of your AUM, assets under management, especially your financials. Until then, most of the financial advisor took between 1 to 1.5%. And over the years, it's a lot of money. But because we wanted to do it in a software way, we could take, a quarter of a percentage. So we wanted a robot, basically, a software to manage your money, to brand it as a software company versus bank. And my vision was really to build like a Volvo for finance, something that you actually trust. And after 2008, many people didn't trust their financial advisor and their banks. Another twist that we did was understanding that the usual approach for financing till this day is diversifying your portfolio, which is a very cool approach. You learned it in your MBA, but it doesn't work too well, at least these days, because it's a global market now and everything is correlated. So it's not that you can actually diversify it and it will work for sure. So for instance, in 2008, everything crashed. Real estate crashed, the stock market crashed. So you didn't really have a tool that you can invest in. So the right approach is not to just diversify your portfolio, is to actually have a different approach, which is hedging with options. And options is basically a financial tool that you can use. 99.999% of people out there don't know what are options, definitely not how to buy them. And the idea was for the software to buy it. So you could say, I want to invest, for instance, $10,000, and then how much you're willing to lose in the worst case scenario, let's say 10%. Enter, and we're basically doing everything for you. You don't need to do anything. So this means if the market crashes by 50%, you're not going to lose more than 10. However, if the market jumps by 20%, you're not going to make 20% because there is a cost, right? So you're going to make 10%, not 20%, so there is a cost. But we believe that for risk-averse consumers, it's actually the right kind of tool. That was the idea. And we started a company. It was bootstrapped. I convinced 3 other people to join me, 2 developers and another designer, and we started it. And over the past month, and when I was talking to people, on one hand, they were excited about it. And I also brought different financial advisors that are expert in this, that told me, yes, it's the right approach. Nobody did this before. But then I understood that there are a few intrinsic problems here. The first one is that I want people that are risk-averse to put money in a startup, right, in a tech startup. So unless you have a brand name, who is going to invest money, and especially from their pension? So that was one big problem. Because of that also, if you want to do user acquisition to bring basically users, it's super costly. So the first users are going to cost you more than $1,000 to bring one actually customer. So it's super expensive. Another thing is that if you're taking only a quarter of percentage from your assets under management, this means that you need billions and billions of assets under management to actually make real money. So how you actually do that? So to do that and actually build a Volvo for finance, you need hundreds of millions of dollars. So after about 10 months, I understood that it's not going to happen. And I decided to close shop. But for me, it was, I learned a lot. It was, understanding that you had a great idea, but make sure that you're not in love with your idea, but actually think through the business model, think through the economics. Yeah.
Okay, now you've been developing your own startup and you've been bootstrapping, right? So you've talked the A+ talent into the team, and they all said, okay, yeah, we'll try and work for a year and get a share of the company.
Yeah.
That was the deal, right?
That's right.
Okay, because for me, especially when I think about startups and attracting, senior people with loads of experience, I start thinking, what are the motivational drivers for them to come to such a venue, venture?
I think at the end of the day, it goes back to portraying the vision and wanting to do something big, to work with good people. This is where your network comes into place. So the first person that joined is a very good friend of mine that I knew for like 15 years. Another one was the guy that I told you from Sonic Biz. I brought him also to this startup. So it was really about, who are those people that, followed you for years and know who you are and believe in you and believe in the idea and believe that it can be big. So, if this was successful, it could be a huge company, right? Like it's fintech in general, like 6 years ago was just beginning. Now it's a hot thing, right? Like machine learning. But back then it was super new. So it was new technology, a brand new idea. Till this day, by the way, it doesn't exist, right? This exact approach. And also you could really help users, right? So if I can really help many investors put their money and the money is safe, you're doing really good, right? It's like exactly the opposite of all those binary companies that are trying to take money from you, right? It's like exactly the opposite approach.
Are you still friends with those guys you brought?
Yeah.
You stole a year of their lives,
Yeah. I think all of us really learned from it. So the guy from Toronto that the day I took to Sonic Biz now is at Wix.
Okay.
Yeah. Another guy just moved to different startups. So, they found their way.
You took your shares of lessons and
I think that, failing is really good. I really believe in failing. also in my next startup, I'm going to hopefully make it with people that failed in startups. So unless you can do it with founders that were super successful, which is always awesome, then I prefer to do it with founders that fail over founders that never did it before. Because you learn so much doing startup. So, yeah.
Okay, so that was, I guess, the last stop before you came to Wix.
That's right.
So how did that happen?
Yeah. So once I closed my startup, I basically knew every VC in Israel. And one of them was a friend who worked at Bessemer. And they invested in Wix, and he introduced me to the founders. And then I decided to join Wix. And I actually joined Wix in a very generic role. Like there was no defined role. Hey, you're going to manage that part. And it actually reminded me of a story that Eric Schmidt recruited Sheryl Sandberg, who is now CEO of Facebook. Back then, he was convincing her to join Google. Again, now it's obvious to join Google, but back then it was still, it was after the bubble burst. Internet back then was, is it actually going to work or not? And he needed to convince her. And he told her, when there is a company that is like a rocket ship, you don't need to ask in which seat I'm sitting, just sit, right? Don't be stupid. When I was talking to different people before I joined Wix, I understood that it's going to be a very big player in the market. So already back then it was the biggest basically site builder tool in the web. When I joined, we were like about 350 employees. Today we're 1,800, right, in 5 years. And we are almost $500 million in collections this year. But back then, again, it was much smaller than today, but I could see where it's going. And this is why I decided to join. It was like, I believed in the product, I believed in the people, the technology. And
how many people were there already by the time in the company?
Yeah, 350.
And now?
1,800.
1,800, yeah, so some growth.
Yeah.
Some growth. Okay, and so you've seen this company grow so big and so successfully. Yeah. What do you think are the main, success factors, the key drivers for that?
So one of them we already talked about is people, right? So it's like exactly what we did there. This is exactly how I started also the division that I'm responsible for. So I'm responsible for the consumer experience division, which is basically made of from 4 different business units. One of them is Wix ADI, which is one of the newest products where we help novice users build their own website by asking a few questions, and then we build the website for them. Wix My Account, which is a way for us to actually manage and grow your business. Wix CRM and Wix Infrastructure. And this is exactly how I started. It's really understanding who are the right people to recruit and how to grow. The second part is the unique, I would say, org structure, which is made from companies and guilds. So companies are those kind of business units, right? Think of it like a startup that you're managing. Every company has a business, a product line that it's responsible for. And it has all the functions inside of it. So there are CEOs for each company, and they're managing the product, engineering, QA, marketing, analysts, everyone.
All those, and marketing is internal Correct. To the company.
So part of it is internal, so product market is internal, but in terms of user acquisition, brand management, PR, that's cross-functional.
Okay.
So there's still that corporate level, like HR, right? Finance, accounting, part of marketing, support, and then there are companies. Again, they're responsible for a specific product line, like restaurants and e-commerce and CRM, a way for you to promote your business. And so we have about, I would say, 20. Then you have guilds. So guilds are like a cross-function, which are really focused on professional development. So for instance, there is someone that is responsible for everything to do with design, everything to do with UX, with product, with front-end development, with QA, with server. And every person at Wix, unless they're in the corporate level, they are reporting to the CEO of the company, and they are dotted line to the guild manager. Right?
Okay.
So on one hand, the CEO of the company is saying, this is the direction that we're going, and they have ownership there, and then there is someone that is actually helping with professional development, which means helping with recruitment, mentoring, doing conferences, everything to do with making sure that each function is performing better and better and having those kind of best practices.
When did the Wix start like having the structure? I mean, okay, so I have, let's say I have a startup and it's I don't know, let's say 50 employees, and we're starting to have another like business line. Yeah. Should that be another company inside a company? So what was your mechanics also in a time-wise?
Yeah. So I think it was around 400 or 500 people. Actually, our CEO was super honest and said, I know how to manage a 100 people company. I don't know how to manage a 1,000 company, but I know how to manage a few startups. So let's break it into startups. So he was super honest with us, and this is how we came with the approach. So I would say when you're between 300, 400, 500 people, I think then it makes sense to actually start to think about breaking it into business units. Before that, I think when you're a smaller startup, you don't really need all that.
Okay, so what are your challenges at Wix now?
So, thinking about scale all the time, how you scale. So now my division, is more than 100 people. So how you manage 100 people? Basically, you have managers of managers. How you teach management to people.
How many levels below you?
About 4. Yeah. So for instance, I started a course where I took about 22 people that actually managing people, either for the first time or they're senior. And every few weeks we're actually meeting and talking about some of the dilemmas around management and how to manage people in the right way, the Wix way. But when you scale, you really need to think through how you teach people. How to manage. Again, it's people are not born with that. It's a skill that you need to learn like everything else. And it's really, really important to invest a lot of time there. I also invest a lot of time in making sure that the right people are at the right places. Again, as you grow, you need more managers. So how you train new managers, how you know when to move them from an individual contributor to actually management, how you know that they're fit. So I have, for instance, one-on-ones with every person that is managing someone every 2 weeks to make sure that I'm up to date with what's happening there. So, scalability is one thing that is top of mind for me. Another one is how we continue to move fast. So every day I'm always thinking about how we can improve things. If it's processes, people, technology, product, everything. Unless you continue to understand how to improve the system, at some point it's going to be still and not to move fast enough. And for me, it's really important that we'll always be in a startup mentality, which is something that is super cool to do because usually in bigger companies you don't have that option. And in Wix, because of the culture and the unique structure, you actually are able to move very fast even though it's a big company.
Mm-hmm. So do you spend a lot of time, you yourself, maybe with your peers, or maybe the founder level, discussing or defining what is this Wix way? Because you've mentioned you want to see that people are performing in Wix way. So do you spend a lot of time on defining what is it? Do you review that Wix way often?
So it's actually something that we're going to do more and more. We started to talk about it in the Wix management, how we actually going to, again, scale the organization, how to do it the right way. So we are doing, we're going to do courses around that. And there is a Wix way to manage things. It's And I think it's unique. It's being super honest with people and telling them exactly what it is and not sugarcoat things. People being very innovative, moving fast, getting things done mentality, taking a lot of ownership. So it doesn't matter if you're a developer, a QA, designer, product. You always have ownership. You can move things end to end. So and I think that it's really important to continue to have those kind of conversations, because the founder had that, when they started Wix, and it's important for me to make sure that it's maintained also when we are, 2,000 company, right?
Okay, yeah, so it sounds like a lot of chutzpahs to me on a daily basis, nearly.
In general, Wix is really a big chutzpah.
Big chutzpah place. Okay, so it seems you have lots of experience with the growth of startups and scalability. Maybe you can discuss some dynamics of growth that you have seen and how to scale on from maybe from local to global. What steps need to be taken? Maybe what mental cues would inform you that you're approaching some local maximum and you need a leap. Maybe there's this growth dynamics.
Yeah. So there are different ways to look at it. If you're talking more HR way, so we started only in Israel, and then when we understood that we were growing fast, we looked at other geos, like Lithuania, about how we actually can scale and how we grow and how we find other geos that we can find talent. So that's from an HR perspective, how you actually think through that. And again, when you're small companies, you probably prefer everyone to be in the same geo. Then when you grow, then you can actually have managers to be able to manage that kind of remote organization, which is a big challenge, mainly for a startup. If you think through products then and how to scale products and how to think about the next big thing, then a regular approach to doing product is that you're launching a product and then you keep iterating. So you do different A/B tests and you're iterating and you're improving the product. But when you're doing that, you're getting to what I call local maximum. So if you can think of a graph, there is you're here, and if you improve it, you'll get to somewhere here, which is like a local maximum. But in order to get to what I call a global maximum somewhere, you really need to take like a leap of faith, right, and do something very different. And I think that Wix is a really good example of that. We did it a few times. So one example could be My Account. When I joined, My Account was really a place where you build your site. So it was like a big edit button. You click on edit and you went to the editor. That's it. And today, basically, My Account is a way for you to build, but also to manage and grow a business. So you have your CRM. You have different applications that live inside My Account, which helps you in terms of SEO and doing marketing campaigns and bringing more traffic, moving people from visitor to leads to customers. It's a whole ecosystem that we build. Now, if we continue to iterate on that old My Account and don't take the vision approach, we won't get where we are. The same with ADI. So we have an amazing Wix editor, which is probably the best website builder in the world, which is like PowerPoint. So if you know drag and drop and you know how to do a PowerPoint, you probably can build a great website. But when we talk to users, they have issues with the Wix editor or any website builder in the world. They're not techie, they're not designers, they don't know how to write copy, they don't have time. And to actually solve all those issues inside the current product is really hard. So we had to take a leap of faith and invest a lot of time in developing Wix ADI, which is a totally different approach to website building, where we ask you different questions and build a website for you. And then with a few clicks, you can customize it. And we always make sure that your site is beautiful. So we never let you get to an ugly zone. So if we identify that you're in an ugly zone, we change the design automatically for you, right? So to take this leap of faith, we would never do that with those kind of small A/B tests and small iterations. You have to think through how to make something really big. Again, it might fail, right? But unless you're willing to fail, you will never succeed.
Yes, this failure thing, I always repeat that. I think in Lithuania, one of the problems is that we have stigmatized the failure. So from my point of view, is really important to fail and fail faster, and I encourage everyone to fail. I failed myself many times, and I hope most of them are behind me now. But yeah, it's really the learning opportunities. Okay, so maybe now wrapping up your experience, maybe you could extrapolate. So what's in front of us? What trends do you see in the industry, maybe? And how can we prepare? Thinking of our startups, maybe. Because here, sure, we have either founders or people that are thinking of that. So, would you share some advices for them?
Sure.
Yeah?
So maybe I'll start with the last thing that you mentioned. I think when we're entrepreneurs, and I was many times in that kind of position, we always think about entrepreneurship as doing something that you have to own and start a company. And I feel that you can do a lot of entrepreneurship inside companies. So in VCs, it's called entrepreneurship in residence, which means something else, which basically means that you're working with different startups, and eventually they're going to invest in you when you're doing a startup. But you can take that same approach and do actual entrepreneurship inside a company, which, if you look at my career, although I did startups, most of my experience was doing, founding new teams and founding new products inside existing company. And as long as you have that kind of an environment which allows you to start new things, you can do amazing things inside companies. So I think the first advice is for entrepreneurs to consider that you don't have to start your own business. You actually can do it inside another company, and they have the budget for it. So you don't also, when you have your own company, most of what you're doing as CEO is thinking how you're going to get to raise the next funds, right? Okay, I have money for a year, that's great, and then after 6 months you need to restart to think about it. So instead of managing your business, you need to think through funding. So being a part of a big company is actually something that can take that away from you and can really focus on that.
Safety Net, was it your first startup?
It was the first startup that I actually started from the ground, yes.
Okay, how old were you?
33.
33. Yeah, that's my reasoning is that also too many people just finish the university and they go founding startups without network, without capital, without real business experience, without knowing the business processes, the sales to B2B sales, for example. So I really second your thought that you should really try and be entrepreneurial inside the company.
Yeah, I'm saying that it's a good option. You don't have to do it, but it's a good option. And the way I'm thinking about it is that for me, I'm always trying to think what I want to learn next. Now, if I can learn next whatever it is that I want to learn next, I can do it most likely in a company that I'm founding, so I'm going to do that. But if I now want to understand, for instance, how to use acquisition better, or how to develop consumer web products or whatever, then probably I want to join a company that is really doing that and they're expert in that. I can learn a lot, and then after X years, I can actually go and do my own thing. So when I was young, I was really pressured I have to do my startup, And now I'm actually thinking through, timing, it doesn't matter. It will happen someday. I'm sure that someday I'm going to found my own company again. It's a matter of time, right? But I don't care when, right? I care more about, okay, am I still learning at my current position? And again, as I mentioned, we grew so much that at Wix, I feel that every year I actually have a different role, right? So as long as you feel that you're still learning, then why leave, right? And if you know what you need to learn next, then think through what's the best place for you to learn that.
And okay, so you say it's very important to know what you need to learn next. And you have this vision of sometime founding your own company. So does that structure your learning priorities? What structures? What defines what's important for you to learn?
So again, it depends where you want to be. So when you're thinking about,
for you.
Yeah. So for me, because I want to found my own business and be CEO of a company that will also grow and be a big company, then I wanted a CEO experience. So right now I have pretty much CEO experience, right? I'm managing different functions. I have my own ownership. So it's really similar to being a CEO. And again, I'm learning every day, right? So every day that I'm currently at Wix, I'm learning. And it's something that will help me in the future.
Was this drive for the learning also driving your decisions, joining various companies in your previous career?
Yeah, definitely.
You maintain some vision that you want to be when you're 50. And,
yeah. So it's
how does it work?
So it's a bit romantic to think about when you're 50, but I did think through like 5 years, in advance, or 10 years in advance, at least to have like a beacon, right? Like where I want to be. And for each one of us, it's different, right? For me, I knew from a young age where I want to be, so it was a bit easier for me. But at every stage, I knew what I'm missing. So for instance, product, I knew that I'm missing product, and I understood that I need to learn what it means and what it means to do marketing. And I'm lucky to have dev experience, right? And now management experience. And so every time that I'm moving to a different role, a different company, then I'm taking something with me.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so learning is a very important part of your decision making, but during your really wonderful career, and congrats, what did you learn? What are main important things to keep going and to get new and more exciting opportunities to learn?
Yeah. So one of the things that I realized is that I need to love what I'm doing. So for instance, if we'll go back to safety nets as an example, one of the things that caused me to stop working on it beside the economics is that I like finance, but I'm not super passionate about finance. Mm-hmm. And when you're starting a startup, you have a romantic idea that maybe after a year or 2 years, a company will acquire you. But the average says that an exit, if you're lucky to get into an exit or IPO, it's 7 years. So when you're starting a company, think that you're going to do this day in and day out for 7-10 years. So unless you're super passionate about it, don't do it, right? And for me, it was, again, something that I learned that, every day you need to wake up in the morning, look at yourself in the mirror, and, you be excited about what you're doing. If not, then why do it, right? Life is short. So I'm always thinking, hey, if I want to continue to do that, and if I'm still passionate about that kind of product. So that's, an advice to, when you think about startup, don't think about how you make a quick buck, but how you actually build something that will actually make an impact and that you love doing.
Yeah, that resonates with the previous fireside chat. We had a wonderful lawyer, local guy, and he meets many teams here in Lithuania, and he says, guys, start thinking about the problem you're gonna solve, not about making a quick buck. So that's really, you cannot underscore that enough. Okay, so what else do you think is important? Moving into an entrepreneurial career?
It's a good question. I think it's maybe working with the right people. Make sure that you're surrounded by the right people that you can learn from, that you like working with. Making sure that you have the right kind of mentors along the way. So, for instance, M Systems, I mentioned the founder, Dov Moran, which I consider till this day one of my greatest mentors. To make sure that you have the right kind of network. So, for instance, HBS is a good example where there's 60,000 alumni out there, usually in every company in the world, that I can now call and do business with. So think through also what will increase your network, because you always, when you want to start a company, you're going to go into those people that know you, and you want to recruit either money from them or you want them to work with you. So invest in your network.
Okay, so thank you. That's all from me, but we have a wonderful audience who I feel are bursting with questions, and we're gonna pick a few. Do you have any questions? Yes, please.
My question is, how do you measure the performance of managers? Because I've seen teams that would succeed with any manager, and teams that fail because of manager. Like, how do you recognize if it's manager fault or if it's the team that's failing?
Yeah, it's a tough one because when we're thinking about KPIs, key performance indicators, we always think about things that are easy to measure. So how to measure that? So from my perspective, there are two things. One is their team that they're managing are happy or not, right? Are they able to maintain the top talent? Is it fun to work with them? And if they're effective in getting to their own goals. So there's not one thing, there are a couple of things. But if all these things happen, probably they're good managers.
Why do you think Yahoo failed against Google?
Yeah, it's a good question. So if you think about Yahoo and Google, both of them started by founders, came from Stanford, super smart people. Just Google continued to invest in technology and be true to their core. And Yahoo started to bring CEOs that are not from the tech world. So they started to bring CEOs from media companies, and then Yahoo became a media company, not a tech company. Yahoo Search actually was through different two acquisitions. So the DNA of Yahoo Search was still techy, but it was very different than the DNA of Yahoo. That's why Yahoo and Yahoo Search didn't work too well together. And this is why the CEOs wanted to spin it off, because they didn't really know what to do with a tech company. But I believe that in order to be successful, definitely in that world, you have to be super techy, to be very product-driven and technology-driven. And I think that Google is doing it very well, and Yahoo lost its way through the years. And once you become a media company, then you're a commodity, right? So how you can actually compete? So unless you're maintaining your core, people will leave you, all the smart people will leave you. It's not a company that you want to work with for. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a question. For example, if I have a startup, but I do not have IT knowledge, but I would like to find a person who knows a lot, for example, about development stuff. So how to find the right person who will run your IT things?
You mean how to, I want to make sure that I understand how to find, you mean like a partner that will join you?
Yes.
So I don't know how it's working here, but I'm sure that you have these kind of meetups, right? So I think this is actually a good place to find other people. So I think that if you're looking for instance, a CTO, a tech founder, this is a good example to say that you're looking for someone, and maybe one from the audience will do that. So in Israel, for instance, we have different meetups. And we actually have different meetups, especially for that. So we have meetups where business people and tech people are meeting. They even bring different shirts, so white for techie and black for business or whatever. So people can actually already know who is who, and they're starting to talk. And
I will see more clearly how to find a right person who has, more knowledge. Like about, for instance, I need a developer who knows Android language, for instance. So how to understand, or is it good, a person or not?
Yeah, it's about networking and figure out like other people that you trust, and if they know the guy, right, and if they can understand, if they can assess them. So you need help there, right? You can't do it by yourself. So you need to have a network of people that can help you evaluate your different candidates. You can do it from one perspective, which is if you like working with them or not, which is super important, by the way. But when it's coming to tech, probably you don't have the skill to do it. You have to find someone else. You have to do it. Yeah.
What was the question?
There's a lot of cost towards artificial intelligence. It would be nice to hear what is your thoughts. Will it change your quote, people first?
That's
And will it kill us?
yeah.
Yeah.
So again, first of all, AI is a buzz, right? So everything is AI now. Like everything is fintech now, and probably other things. I think AI is here to stay, and it's going to improve everything. Humans will always be, necessary. It's just a matter of humans moving up in the scale. So they're going to do more the hard tasks, while leaving the mundane and simple task for the computers, right? Which is great, because we can now focus as a human being on doing better things in our time, right? So just consider, automated driving, right? Automated cars. Yeah. Why do you need to wait in traffic? It doesn't make sense, right? Why it takes, an hour to get somewhere? Why there are people that are being killed in the streets, like by car accidents? Like, I'm sure that our kids would think that we're crazy, right? Like, you really lived in a period where people went into a car and drove by themselves. It's like, and it makes sense why you need to do that. It doesn't make any sense. You can drive now with software, right? You can drive like 200 kilometers with 0 accidents. So I'm saying that we could spend our time in doing much better things and don't worry about mundane, simple things. So I think it's all for the better.
Okay. Yeah, so thank you for this wonderful discussion. So I'll just quickly mention partners of this wonderful event. So first of all, it's of course thanks to Vilnius Tech Park. And then we thank Go Vilnius, Job Rely, Changemakers On, and Vilnius Gediminas Technical University. Obviously, huge thanks to Wix, who are sponsoring the drinks and snacks for the networking. That's just starting right away. And there is a table for speed networking. Today we heard so many stories and cases of importance of a network. So you could just use that table for speed networking, getting to know each other, interests, sharing contacts, and maybe moving on to get to know each other deeper with drinking in hand. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Nitzan.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.